Right now, in this exact moment, more than 40% of the human beings alive on Earth are using words that trace back to a single source. Not a great empire, not a civilization that left behind monuments or temple archives. A population small enough, mobile enough, and undocumented enough that it left almost no name behind at all. Linguists worked out that a source like this had to exist more than 200 years ago, just from comparing words for mother, water, and wheel across languages separated by oceans and thousands of years. Geneticists eventually confirmed the population was real. What neither group could do, for a long time, was answer the most basic question about it. Not who they became, who they were before that. Every time researchers thought they had finally traced the line back to its root, the evidence pointed further back still, into territory nobody had mapped. The languages in question are the Indo-European family: English, Spanish, Russian, Hindi, Persian, Bengali, and roughly 400 others, spoken by more than 40% of humanity. For most of the last century, two rival explanations competed for how they spread. Archaeologist Maria Gimbutas proposed the Kurgan hypothesis, that these languages began with mobile pastoralists on the Pontic-Caspian steppe, north of the Black and Caspian Seas, who buried their dead beneath earthen mounds called kurgans and expanded outward after about 4,500 BCE. Colin Renfrew countered with the Anatolian hypothesis, placing the origin earlier and further south, tied to farming's spread out of Anatolia around 7,000 BCE. In 2015, ancient DNA seemed to settle it. Genome-wide data from prehistoric skeletons, published in Nature by Wolfgang Hack, David Reich, and colleagues, showed a massive migration around 3,300 BCE from the steppe toward Europe, carried by a people archaeologists call the Yamnaya. The genetic case for that migration was about as strong as evidence gets. Corded ware individuals, appearing across Central Europe within a few centuries, carried close to 3/4 Yamnaya ancestry. It looked like a closed case. But a stranger problem sat underneath the triumph. Hittite, the language of the Bronze Age Anatolian Empire, is confirmed by surviving cuneiform tablets to be the oldest attested branch of the entire Indo-European family. Logically, its speakers should carry some trace of Yamnaya ancestry too. Harvard's David Reich and his team went looking for exactly that signal in the Hittite's own DNA. They came back empty. If the whole language family really descended from the Yamnaya, why did its oldest surviving branch show no genetic connection to them at all? For years, that contradiction had no answer, only a hypothesis that some still deeper, unidentified population had to be sitting underneath both of them. Two explanations tried to close that gap, and each failed for nearly the opposite reason. One leaned on the older Anatolian hypothesis. Hittite diverged first because the family really did begin in Anatolia around 7,000 BCE, with the steppe migration as a later, separate chapter layered on top. That fit the language tree, but not the genetics. When researchers later traced the Indo-Iranian languages arriving in South Asia around 2000 BCE, the ancestry that came with them matched Bronze Age Ukraine and Russia precisely, and carried no trace of any Anatolian farmer signal at all. The opposing explanation went the other way. That Yamnaya ancestry was simply the whole root, full stop, with Anatolian standing as an unexplained exception. But an exception that large, sitting at the very base of the tree, was not a detail anyone could reasonably wave away. Neither model could hold the full shape of the evidence at once. The clearest answer yet arrived in February 2025, when Iosif Lazaridis, David Reich, Nick Patterson, David Anthony, and a large international team published The Genetic Origin of the Indo-Europeans in Nature, Working from ancient DNA of the Neolithic period, they identified a previously uncharacterized population living roughly 4,500 to 3,500 BCE between the lower Volga River and the northern foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, the Caucasus-Lower Volga population. This group contributed close to 4/5 of Yamnaya ancestry, and it also showed direct genetic ties to the Bronze Age populations of Anatolia. It sat genetically before the split, feeding both branches at once. Lazaridis put it plainly, "It's the first time we have a genetic picture unifying all Indo-European languages." If a finding like that can rewrite the root of your own native language, sticking around means catching the next rewrite before it trends. There's a strange kind of inheritance hiding in all of this. Think about the word for your own mother, or the number 2, or the habit of naming a wheel after the way it turns. You didn't invent any of it. You were handed a fully built structure in your first years of life by people who were themselves handed it, going back through thousands of generations to a group whose faces, names, and beliefs are entirely gone. It's a little like discovering that the house you grew up in was built on foundations laid by someone no living person remembers, using techniques nobody ever wrote down, and that you've been walking on those foundations your whole life without once thinking to look down. The Caucasus-Lower Volga population left no writing behind, no ruins anyone has identified as unmistakably theirs. They left something quieter and more durable. They left their shape locked into billions of sentences spoken out loud on Earth today. This isn't only a European story, and it isn't finished at Europe's edge. A 2019 study in Science, led by Vagish Narasimhan with Nick Patterson and David Reich, sequenced more than 500 ancient individuals across Central and South Asia, and found the very same steppe pastoralist ancestry arriving there too, beginning around 2000 BCE, carrying the identical genetic profile found far away in Bronze Age Ukraine and Russia. That shared profile is exactly what explains why Indo-Iranian languages and Balto-Slavic languages, spoken today thousands of miles apart, still share specific grammatical features found nowhere else in the family. Modern South Asians carry that ancestry in amounts ranging from under 10% in the south to a little over 20% in the northwest. One migratory wave, reaching in two directions at once, left the same linguistic fingerprint on both ends of Eurasia. None of this shrinks the languages built from it. Finding the root doesn't make any branch less real, and it doesn't make any single one of them the true version. English is not less English, Hindi is not less Hindi, Russian is not less Russian for having emerged from a shared and previously invisible source. If anything, the discovery makes each of those languages larger, quietly connecting a Punjabi grandmother and an Irish farmer without either one knowing it to the same handful of vanished people on a river plain about 6,000 years ago. That's really the pattern sitting underneath every story like this one. Identity was never a single fixed point you could locate on a map and stop looking. It's a long, slow accumulation, layer over layer, populations absorbing and being absorbed, until the line between where one people ends and another begins stops being a line at all and starts being a gradient. Here's the detail most 2025 coverage skipped past. Among the ancient remains behind that research is a single skeleton from Mikhailivka, Ukraine, dated to roughly 3,600 to 3,400 BCE. The oldest genetically confirmed Yamnaya individual found anywhere, from one of the only known sites with continuous occupation from the Copper Age into the Yamnaya period, making it one of the strongest candidates yet for the ground where Yamnaya culture first took shape. Every sentence you've spoken is a kind of archaeology, built from pieces laid down by people who never knew you'd exist and wouldn't recognize a word you're using now. If that changes how you hear your own language, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. If it earned a minute of your time, liking helps this reach people still working from the old version. There's another vanished population waiting in the next video. Which language in this story turned out to be yours? Tell me in the comments.